Welcome back, Rosebuds! If you're new here, we tell stories in the same format like that old 80s show, Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. Today's stories feature occupational hazards of the unseen. In the realm of whatever causes paranormal activity, there doesn't seem to be discrimination against where ghosts show up and cause haunted happenings. Today, we have a total of 6 spooky spirit encounters that occurred at the places where people work. 5 that are allegedly true, and 1 that is entirely fiction, written by me. Make sure to listen all the way through because at the end, I will reveal which stories were true encounters and which one was the fake. So sit back, dim the lights, and settle in for 6 scary occupational ghostly hazards to tell in the dark. Story number 1. Ice Rink Ghosts. I worked at Moylan Iceplex for a while. I didn't believe in ghosts before working there, but a lot of things happened I can't explain. The most memorable was this one incident where the interior doors were opening and closing on their own. These were heavy doors too, the ones that go from the lobby to the rink. Small children often couldn't push them open. There also used to be spring-loaded doors, loaded to stay closed, and I heard that open and close a few times on its own. On one specific occasion when I was opening up the rink, I even heard a man who asked me a question while my back was turned, and when I turned around to answer the question, he wasn't there. I should mention, there were no other cars in the parking lot at that time. Believe me, I checked. Maybe it was just sleep deprivation from working full-time and being in college. However, I wasn't the only person who saw and heard stuff, so who knows. The employees thought it was the ghost of the owner who died shortly after the place opened. Apparently, he put a lot of time into the rink. It was sort of his baby, and people began to believe that he was there checking up on things, making sure his business was running smoothly. Story number 2. Paranormal Ranch Experience. So this could either be a ghost encounter, or maybe I'm going crazy. I've had ghost encounters before, but never like this. Today I was at the ranch where I work. The sun was going down. I had my truck music on, and the door open. I was working on a pool my boss had bought. Some time passes, and it was a little bit after sundown when I heard a loud metal bang, first coming from my truck. I dismissed it because I thought randomly, must be something in the song. But then I heard it again right behind me. Still, I ignored it. Moments later, I felt as if somebody grabbed both my shoulders. At this point, my fight or flight response was instantly triggered. I knew I was alone out there because my boss and his family live out of state, and this ranch is very off the beaten path. I spun around and got hit with what I can only call tunnel vision. Like when you look through a peephole on a door, but it's very, very dark all around. I froze for a couple of seconds. I couldn't think, hear, move, or yell. Then, just as quick as it happened, it went away, and I dropped to the ground. Not like being pushed or anything. It was as if my legs just gave out. I don't know any of the history on the ranch and have never asked. I will say sometime earlier in the year, I did find these questionable symbols painted on the side of the old barn. Gave me the creeps, like maybe it was ritual magic being practiced. The barn is maybe 300 yards from where I was when this incident occurred. I can look into this being a health issue, but it didn't feel like that. It felt paranormal, especially since I felt like I got grabbed. It's sort of difficult to explain. I've had a blackout before, and this wasn't like that. This was sort of like a light switch went off and then suddenly went on again. I guess if there is an evil spirit out there, it probably doesn't help that we use the ranch as a retreat for pastors. I'm not a spiritualist, just a sort of down-to-earth guy that had a strange experience I can't explain. I'll probably go to the doctor just to be on the safe side, but I doubt they'll find anything of consequence to explain what happened out there that day. Story number 3, Little Ghost Girl. I used to work in a haunted psychiatric hospital. For some background, I've been a behavioral health nurse for about 12 years, and my first job was a freestanding mental health facility in the South. To give some historical background, this facility is pretty uniquely constructed, as it was originally a plantation owned by a wealthy Irishman who immigrated here sometime in the 1700s. The original plantation house is still there and is now used as the business office. The hospital itself was constructed to be attached to the house. If you explore the campus, there's a small graveyard with the original owner's tombstone, as well as some other family members of his. Additionally, there's a sign that says something along the lines of, "This is dedicated to the slaves that worked and died on this plantation." Anyway, one of the stories that has been passed down for decades among the employees is that a young girl in the Irishman's family, one of his daughters or grandchildren, passed away on the plantation at a really young age, and her ghost still lingers around the house and the facility. There are certain patient rooms that have an unusual amount of paranormal activity. One day, I was walking past one of those rooms, and in my peripheral, I saw a young girl who looked to be about 9 or 10 years old sitting on the bed. I stopped and turned to look at her directly. She was wearing a colonial-looking dress, appropriate for the time period of the 1700s. She looked me directly in the eyes when I turned to look at her. I was incredibly startled, and my mind raced for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that she wasn't there. I blinked hard a few times, and then she was gone. The most unnerving thing was, she didn't have any ethereal qualities, nothing otherworldly or strange. She literally just looked like a real person sitting right there in plain view, until she wasn't. During my time there, I never heard of anyone else who saw her as clearly as I did. Every once in a while, one of my coworkers or a patient would experience something strange, like doors opening and slamming shut. I remember one patient in particular. He ran out of his room white as a sheet, distraught, as he explained to me that while he was laying in bed, his bathroom door slammed on its own. Now, the windows were sealed shut, so it couldn't have been a draft. I believed him, given the things I'd experienced, as well as the fact that it was so loud I heard it from the nurse's station. This patient was there for addiction, but had no history of hallucinations. And sure, he could have slammed it himself, but he looked pretty spooked. There are other odd things about this place, but not enough time to tell it all. We now interrupt this broadcast for a brief Black Rose PSA. Did you know that if you don't tap that like button right now, you'll be forced to endure the curse of the Midnight Rogue Lego? That's right, every time you get up to use the bathroom in the dead of night, your foot will connect with a tiny Lego, jostling you out of that half-sleepy state and preventing you from getting back to sleep for hours afterwards. It's absolutely true. So tap that like button, and for an extra measure of protection, leave us a comment and share this episode with your friends. All right, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Story number 4, Convenience Store Haunting. When I was a senior in high school, I worked at a convenience store on the outskirts of this small town in Colorado. It was extremely old and dated. It even had this off smell about it, like mildewy, but something else as well. you'd get a whiff of it sometimes, and it made me really nauseous. Knowing what I know about the paranormal now, it was sort of a sulfury smell, which makes me wonder if we had some sort of demon entity lurking around that place. Anyways, because I was 18 at this point, I could work a shift that was right after school into the late hours. I'd get off around 10 or 11 at the latest. Plus, being that it was the 90s, labor laws were a little more laxed for teens than they are now. When the store was dead, sometimes things would go randomly flying off the shelf. Coworkers would put stuff on the shelves in the back room, only to come in the next day with most of it scattered on the floor, like broken bottles of cleaner they'd have to clean up and stuff like that. Lights would be on when the morning crew came in, but myself and the 2 other night staff people always insisted they'd shut everything down and turned the lights off. It caused a lot of contention until it kept happening, and then my coworker suggested that maybe it was trying to cause us to fight. We stopped accusing each other after that because I think we all suspected something of that nature was going on. These paranormal occurrences were annoying to say the least, and sometimes downright terrifying. I wasn't the only one who saw this dark shadow of something skittering along the periphery of our vision. Just as you turn your head, it wasn't there, often leaving you feeling entirely creeped out and on the brink of insanity, thinking, maybe I'm going crazy. Oh, and by the way, we didn't have a security camera to capture any of this. It was a fake setup to deter robbers. Well, I'm unsure how true this next part is, but it certainly would have been worth looking into. I really wish I had. But remember, I was a teenager and didn't have the luxury of the internet to just do a quick fact check. I would have had to go to the local library to do a microfiche investigation, if anybody even knows what that is. Yeah, I just dated myself there. Anyway, I'd had enough years of homework by that point that wasn't going to happen as a teenager. So a few months into this job, and the manager hires this older, 60-year-old woman. She picks up a night shift job to help supplement her measly Social Security income. She was actually a really nice lady, and I felt bad for her that she had to work and couldn't retire fully. We got along well, but it was the tradition that none of us would outright warn a new employee about the strange happenings. I mean, we didn't want to come off as being crazy. Well, it's not long before she starts experiencing what we're experiencing and says to me one day, I wonder if the ghost activity is because of that robbery/murder that happened here like 30 years ago. Of course, I was intrigued and I ask, what robbery? She goes on to tell me how this young kid had been hitting up gas stations and robbing them. The one we were working in was like his 3rd hit in a week. The owner at that time, who was the original owner, was on duty and stupidly tried to wrestle the gun from the kid's hands. In a twist of fate, the kid shot the guy, but the guy didn't go down right away, and the owner actually managed to get the gun from the kid and shot him back. They both died, because by the time a customer came in and found the grisly scene, they had already bled out. I'm in my 40s now and do believe that horrific accidents like this can cause paranormal activity. I don't live anywhere near that small town anymore, and the gas station has since been bulldozed. There's a shopping plaza that's replaced it. I never did go back and do research to validate the lady's story, but I still wonder sometimes if the plaza might have haunted happenings the same way as we did all those years ago. Story number 5. Not such an enchanting resort. Some years back, I worked at a high-end resort in Sedona, Arizona as a camp counselor for their day camp program. This so-called magical resort was one of the most toxic work environments I've ever encountered to date. I believe it's so bad there that it attracts nasty entities of the worst kind. I experienced more than a handful of creepy things that were very well paranormal. There are a few occurrences that support my theory of how tainted and toxic this place is. Just to be clear, I loved the job itself. Even the kids, who were sometimes rich little spoiled kids, didn't bother me all that much. No, it was the majority of the staff I didn't get along with. This place seemed to attract the worst kind of people, which is relevant to my story later on. For example, the people who worked there were so toxic and plastic fantastic that it really shouldn't have come as a surprise when I got fired for some ridiculous made-up claims. For context, my 3 coworkers were shallow teenage girls, just there to kill their boredom, and the 2 female managers I reported to touted that customer service was their main priority, when in reality, a cocksucking contest was the agenda. Shortly after I was let go, I ran into another coworker, one of the few I actually liked, and he got fired for almost the identical situation as mine. Fake charges because he pissed off the wrong person not playing the high school popularity game. So yeah, it was already that type of place. Anyway, I digress. Sedona is such a small community that there are only a handful of premier resorts in that area. This particular one sits back in a canyon, and they touted that they had special energies flowing through there because of the Native American associations. I'm pretty sure they did the classic white dude thing, take over and taint it with their capitalism, which I think is one of the many reasons this place had such bad energy. Maybe it did have good energy at one time, but that's not the case anymore. I felt as though they were like modern-day snake oil salesmen. Here's one example of the many that I could list. There was this vista hike that was situated just above the resort where they touted that it was a location with special positive energy, which they called the vortex. I hiked this many times, and even though I consider myself sensitive to things of a spiritual nature, I didn't find that area to be all that different than most serene and tranquil places I had hiked in Sedona. Don't get me wrong, the view on that hike is lovely, and Sedona all throughout does have a unique energy, but I have my doubts about their special vortex claims. It all seems more like a marketing ploy that energetically has gone terribly wrong. So here's just a few of the things that I've observed and encountered. One night when I was walking from the camp building to my car, a shadow person walks out in front of me about 10 feet from where I am. I stop and stare at it in disbelief, but then start to shake as I realize it's not human. Then, just as quickly as it was there, it darted into the bushes. I decided to walk back the other way and take the long way around. It is a very dark property at night, and there is not a lot of light. I eventually made it back to my car, but I was so terrified that my hand was shaking as I tried to put my keys in the door. Just so you understand, those bushes were actually what's called xeriscaping in the Southwest, and it's pretty much spiky bushes and cacti. So I realized immediately that wasn't just some human creeper guy. It was an inhuman, creepy thing. It wasn't a real person that jumped into the side brush. They would have been in immediate pain and there would have been noise, except no noise, just gone. This happened near the camp building, and the camp building itself always felt off, day or night. I always felt there was some kind of entity in the back room of the camp building. It's where they stored supplies and such. None of us liked to go back there, especially at night. It felt really creepy and wrong. We eventually were instructed to turn it into a lounge area for kids to just sit and relax, play games. It had black lights, lava lamps, and bean bags, so it was pretty cool. But kids didn't like to go in there, and the ones that did, ironically, didn't stay long. I worked there for almost a year, and then they fired me for some trumped-up charges about drinking on the job, which is pretty laughable because I don't drink except with my family meals on major holidays. Alcohol just isn't my thing. At the time, I was upset, but I believe karma's real, and I now live a very happy life in New England, which is where I've always dreamed of living. And I have a job I love. I think back on those shallow people, especially the shallow girls and fake-ass managers, and actually feel sorry for the lot of them. I know people like that who become more and more entrenched in their high school drama BS seem to carry it well into their adult lives and are pretty miserable. All in all, I was really glad to be out of there because not too long after, I found out from my husband, who also worked there, that a couple went to stay there explicitly for the purpose of committing a ritual couple's suicide. Yeah, that's right. Basically, the husband shot his wife, then shot himself. The room was tiny, and I heard it was basically like a real-life horror movie scene. I find it incredibly ironic that there were any number of budget hotels or even luxury resorts, but they chose this place of all the hotels or resorts in Sedona. This place that supposedly has enchanted, magical, spiritual energy. Now that's laughable. The resort paid off the media to stay quiet about the whole thing. The regulars from the Phoenix area who frequented the resort were none the wiser, but the entire staff knew about it. The resort comically tried to hire a shaman to come in and cleanse the room. I don't think it worked, because I heard from other staff, including my spouse, that when they walked by that one room, it always felt like something wasn't right, and there were paranormal occurrences that started to occur in that particular area. This resort only continued to go downhill more and more, and last I heard, the pandemic had hit them hard. As far as I know, they're still in business, but if you happen to be in Arizona and are spirit or paranormal sensitive, I recommend staying as far away from this place as possible. It's not the most enchanting of vacation areas, as they love to tout. You'll overpay, be underwhelmed, and might just bring a few curses or nasty entities home with you in the process. And who knows what other crimes have occurred besides a murder-suicide. In my opinion, it's not worth the hassle. Well, Rosebuds, have you ever experienced a haunted work environment? Drop us a comment and tell us your story. Okay, on to our reveal. Story number 4 about the gas station attendant that experienced a bad entity causing problems was a completely fake story. I did write this story. I usually have a real-life situation that inspires my stories, but this time, I just pulled it from the old creative noggin, but I hope you enjoyed it all the same. All right, Rosebuds, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Take care and stay creepy.